My only qualification here is I'm very happy with the way I turned out. I went from pretty normal kid playing a lot of video games, watching YouTube and stuff like a couple years ago to making more money than my parents. And I don't know, I could go on and be super humble about everything, but I think I'm doing quite well in life for my age. And money is just like one very arbitrary factor. So I wouldn't count your value in this world as that at all, because there are some professions that make way more than others for no reason, just because that's the way things ended up. Looking at like tech and corporate compared to academia and just essential workers who don't make that much money, and then there's like all entrepreneurship and stuff, and it's a fucked up world in terms of like monetary reward based on how valuable you are. So I wouldn't count that, but for whoever is like still a kid and still thinks like you're defined by how much money you make, there you go, I make money. But what's much more valuable than that for me is I have taste that's different than the mainstream, and I have like clarity towards a lot of the things that are wrong with the world, and I can see through a lot of things, and a lot of problems that other people have, I can just see right through them and see what the solution is. And I don't know, that's all vague, like schizophrenic sounding I'm enlightened bullshit, but you kind of know what I mean if you're a Luke Smith watcher. So my first piece of advice is read to your kids a lot in early childhood. And I didn't have a TV or anything. That was our form of entertainment. I didn't have like video games or anything like that until much later, like when I was 12. And by reading to me all the time, I did have kind of a weird, like hard time relating to other kids who just watched mainstream TV shows. But you get so much more nuanced like ethics and a view of the world when you're read to, and it's all these different things rather than just boiled down super simplistic, like this is good, this is bad, sharing is caring kind of mainstream TV messages. So that's what I would say, is read to your kids a lot. And it also kind of instills in them a love of reading. For me, that was turned into audiobooks because I have a hard time sitting still, but very important for later in life. So definitely do that with your kids. Next, what I would say is give them some other kind of skill. If you have some kind of skill, try to transfer it to your kids. My mom is a cartoonist professionally, and she taught both of us to draw, so I kind of kept that with me. And before you have like access to the internet when you're a young kid, like, and that's all you're doing, it's a great time to just practice something and get good at something. This could be anything, and it honestly could be like an internet skill. Like a lot of you probably programmers or Vim users, or teach your kid how Linux works like before they turn 10. I mean, that's kind of an awesome thing to know about early, and it's like a big advantage while your kid is like still early and developing, and before they have like all these distractions of other kids and the internet. Like, teach them some skill they can put time into. And the next one is be very firm in your beliefs, but don't enforce them to the point where it's like you don't want to overcorrect your kids' behavior. You also don't want to have no spine though, and let them do whatever they want, because both scenarios you'll end up with like bad kids in the end. So I'll give an example of that worked out excellently for my parents. So I didn't have video games, as I mentioned, until I was about 12. And when I first discovered them, which were like mobile games, like I think Terraria was the first big one I played. And just to out myself as a Zoomer, I guess, like that world, after not having any access to anything like that, was just like the most mind-blowing, like addictive, insane thing for me. Like I would just spend a ridiculous amount of time playing these video games. But my parents, like during that whole early time, and also like before it, like were very anti-video games, right? Huge waste of time, like brain rot, gave me all of that lecturing, and like heavily limited how much time I could play them. But as I kept growing up, I had more and more agency. Like you can't really, when you're a kid, you pretty much do whatever your parents tell you, but as you get into early teen years, you start to have more agency, do your own things, and kind of almost instinctually go away from what your parents are telling you. So I just started playing more and more video games despite what they were telling me. And they eventually, like, they tried to get me to stop several major times, but I just like, I did not want to hear it. And then they just backed off, which I think was the absolutely correct move. Because if you force your kids into doing what you want, they're going to be like, they're suppressing that urge, and eventually when you can't control them anymore, like they go off to college or something, then they're just going to do that thing like boundlessly out of control. And what them like allowing me to play as many video games as I wanted basically did is it burned through my system, and now like a lot of people my age still playing them, and I have no interest anymore because I played so many. It was like, now I just don't care. I've experienced that. And this also ties back into the audiobook thing from later. So playing video games for a lot of people is arguably a big waste of time. I mean, if you're a kid, it doesn't really matter. You don't need to be career grinding. But I kind of, seeing my parents both being in academia, working all the time, and they're like instilling the values video games are a waste of time, I was slowly like, okay, this isn't like, I shouldn't be doing this all the time. I felt a little bad about it deep down. So I started listening to audiobooks and podcasts and stuff during it. I remember playing Pocket Edition Minecraft, and on like an iOS device, you can't play an audiobook in the background. But I figured out if you pull down the like media player thing and spam the play pause button, for some reason, the like audio canceller event handler bugs out, so you can play audio through the game sound and just mute the game sound. So I do that to listen to podcasts and audiobooks like all the time. And that slowly became like YouTube after a while. And I think at one point I got into like speed solving Rubik's Cubes, which is a pretty useless hobby, to be honest, in terms of what it's actually achieving, but it's also not at all, because it's like an early stage way to get into learning on your own and practicing a skill. Like just reducing the amount of time it takes to solve a Rubik's Cube. You have to know many different algorithms and steps and optimizations, and you spend a lot of time kind of doing research on YouTube. And like, it's just like a great hobby because of it's teaching you how to practice and how to learn something on your own, which is a direct pipeline to programming. I'm not sure exactly when I got into programming, but like playing video games, and I remember listening to programming tutorials in the background. And eventually I just kind of played less and less video games, watched more and more tutorials and stuff like that. And even though it was like unbounded amounts of video games and YouTube, it slowly morphed into productivity, just because in the back of my mind, like my parents had instilled that's what was best. And even though you have that agency as a kid, if you give the values to your kid very strongly early on, they almost always come back to it. And you can notice this also with religion, very interestingly. I know many Catholics or other religious people who, like, their parents, they grew up very religious, right? As a kid, they were very religious. And then towards their teen years, they kind of disagreed with their parents, and people do this with politics and stuff too, and they go out in a very different direction. But then later in life, they return back to the religion, and this happens like a lot. And it's just kind of a natural instinct, I think, to question your parents when you are at a certain age. Hopefully I'm not getting a ticket. I think I'm parked illegally. So in summary, yeah, just instill the beliefs very strongly, then let your kids go, figure it out themselves, and chances are, if you've done things right and you're supportive of them, they'll come back to your original beliefs. Like, I know that for many different parts, many different things my parents have told me, where I went through a phase of questioning, like, that sounds dumb, that sounds wrong, but then I started to realize, no, they were actually right about that. And that's just an example with the video games. It's maybe the biggest one that's shaped my life, but hundreds and hundreds of other little things. You know, you can teach your kids all the optimizations of life. Like, my parents eat very healthy and very frugally, and like, I went through a phase of being like, no, that's wrong. I mean, like, how bad can junk food and stuff really be for you? I mean, like, I did the nutrition math and I was like, this is just the same carbs and stuff. And then I've come back around to it. And you can instill tons of different hobbies, tons of different little habits and stuff in your kids like that. So being a strong example and then letting them go off on their own, but still keeping your beliefs, like, give them your beliefs over and over again, but don't force them into it. Because if you do that, if you overcorrect, it does not go well. Same thing with undercorrect. I know parents who just like never said to a kid like that video games are bad. They never gave them that rhetoric, and then the kid just like has no reason to ever stop and is kind of just in an endless cycle. So yeah, that's some of my parenting advice there. And then another thing is, like, when you give your kids all that reading at a young age, all that exposure to information, like, this is just how you get a bunch of information. You know, I was naturally very curious about things. I just listened to books about basically everything I could and got a lot of my information that way. And past a certain age, my parents, like, they never really talked to me about sex or anything like that strongly. Maybe they mentioned it, but I don't think they really did. But I had just read so many books and like listened to so many podcasts at that point. I didn't need that education at all. And if you can get your kids to teach themselves stuff like that, I think like I was very lucky to connect the dots and listen to a ton of books and stuff while I was playing video games, because otherwise that would have wasted just a bunch of my time. I still kind of wish, like, man, I wish I had just been like a prodigy and practiced programming ever since I was 8, but not really that realistic. I mean, and you can't go back and change anything. And the circumstances, I think, are excellent. Another kind of random side one is Magic the Gathering is a great hobby to get your kid into. I know it's like super nerdy, but the thing is, like, it's a non-video game activity, right? I mean, there's an online version of it now, but I remember that being great because it's like you get a bunch of friends together, physical activity kind of, and you also interact with a bunch of people and learn a bunch of like etiquette through that. And also it's like a way to teach your kids decently complicated math, like from a young age. And it's something you can get very into. It's also got like a collection and trading component, so it teaches your kids about like value of, like, abstract value of things. And it's just like a great creative outlet, a great thing to do with your friends. I got into it pretty young. I think my dad's friend got me into it. And yeah, it was just a great way to spend time and taught me a lot about a lot of things. It's also really great for your reading and literacy. They use like a lot of words that are pretty challenging. And it's like great for understanding complex systems of rules. And yeah, it's just a great experience. It can be expensive, but there's very cheap ways to get into it too. So I'd hugely recommend that. Another thing is traveling is really good. I'm very lucky in terms of my circumstances of traveling. My family is not rich by any means because they're like professors. They make livable money for sure, but not tech job money, that's for sure. But we got to travel a whole lot because like they specialize in like ancient world stuff, and if you're a professor you get like sabbaticals and stuff where your travel is paid for. So I ended up in all these weird places. Like I lived half a year in like Israel. No connection to any like religious thing there at all. Just like there's an institute there that studies a very specific thing related to something my dad was studying. And same thing with like Cyprus and just other parts of the world. And that was really good because you get to see what it's like outside of your immediate cultural bubble. Especially if you live in America, that can be kind of hard, especially if you don't have the money to do it. But I would just try to do that to expose your kids to it. If you're in America, best bet on a budget is like to drive to either Canada or South America, I guess, if you're close to either one of those borders, to get into another country. But yeah, just exposing your kids to other things, or I guess just show them like foreign films and anything like that. But yeah, that's about all I have. I mean, I'm not all that qualified to say this. I know one day when I have kids, I want them to be like insanely overpowered. I just want them to be like prodigy billionaires. That's the goal. And I think I turned out pretty well. Definitely I'm like a late bloomer in terms of success. Like I was pretty weird in high school, and I mean I still am quite weird, but my upward trajectory, my momentum is pretty high, and I'm quite happy about how I ended up. And I think that was in large part, yeah, thanks to my parents just knowing exactly how to handle everything. And yeah, that's about it. Catch you next time.